Welcome to the first real edition of Aim Small, Big Miss. First of all, I want to thank everyone who tuned into the premiere show last week for all your support and positive feedback. This is going to be an amazing journey, and I'm thankful to do it along with you. Now, what's on my mind today? A topic that the talking heads in the media are beaten down worse than a dissenter of Vladimir Putin crossing a bridge with his girlfriend: diplomacy, defense, and Syria. A couple weeks ago, the Trump administration announced proposed budget cuts to the tune of $50 billion, or 28%, to the Department of State and USAID. That money is to be allocated to the Department of Defense for military affairs, an organization that President Trump once knew more about than the generals and admirals who run it. Military action is the last line of diplomacy. The United States does not need to invoke military intervention until all efforts on the diplomatic side have failed. Even George Bush and Colin Powell knew that in 2003 before going into Iraq, when they didn't put Saddam and his two spoiled sons on notice, but they gave him an ultimatum: step down or face the full force of the United States. When we talk about budget cuts or budget reallocation, the focus for national security and foreign policy needs to be on a whole-of-government approach. You can't simply say that defense operates in this silo and diplomacy operates in this silo and that the two do separate things. Our defense is based on our ability to use diplomacy with foreign nations to achieve our overall goals. Some countries, we do that unilaterally, like Germany, even if we don't want to shake their hand. With other countries, we use an intermediary, or non-governmental actor, who will then forge that relationship. You can't necessarily say that taking $50 billion from state and giving it to defense means that we're going to get $50 billion worth of military results. In fact, going to war, military action, is more expensive than diplomacy in terms of hard finance numbers and human capital. Let's look at an example starting from the most fundamental level. Who from the U.S. side actually owns decision-making authority? In a declared combat zone like Iraq or Afghanistan, DoD holds the final decision-making authority. But outside of a declared combat zone, the U.S. ambassador and the State Department own all decisions with respect to U.S. activities. Think about Africa or South America, where low-intensity conflict exists. The U.S. State Department's relationship with the host nation is paramount, simply because I can't just roll into a sovereign nation, don my green beret, and lead a bunch of trident-wearing warriors to the infidels.
Are they jumping out? Yeah, they're out.
In 2014, Boko Haram kidnapped over 200 schoolgirls in northern Nigeria. Sure, the U.S. military could have answered Michelle Obama's Facebook call, boarded a bunch of C-17s, and combat jumped into the jungle, but it was the U.S. ambassadors and the State Department's relationships with the leaders of those West African nations that ultimately gave U.S. Special Operations Forces the access, funding, and capability to train those nations' own military forces to combat Boko Haram, with the U.S. in a supporting role. Pumping $10 million of State Department money into a special operations program aimed at helping a country solve its own problems now and into the future is a hell of a lot cheaper than deploying U.S. military assets en masse to solve a nation's problem for them. Plus, we get to leave behind a capable force to protect and defend their own nation and a strategic partner into the future. Or, welcome back to Iraq. We sure missed you. Last point. Last week, the Trump administration launched 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles into an airfield in Syria.
I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
That's 59,000 pounds of explosives at a cost of $1 million per missile, depending on the variant of the missile that they used. Now, don't get me wrong. The use of chemical weapons in Syria is a red line that the U.S. must enforce, and we must enforce it with decisive action. But what did we really get for our $59 million investment? sure, it was a message to Assad and the rest of the world that the U.S. will no longer sit at the table hand-wringing, talking about what they're going to do.
The United States will not stand by when chemical weapons are used. It is in our vital national security interest to prevent the spread and use of chemical weapons.
And sure, we degraded some military capability that Assad had used to launch these chemical attacks, but we're already seeing reports that these planes are using the airfield again, they're back in the air, and potentially back in combat operation.
The United States took a very measured step last night. We are prepared to do more.
Diplomacy has failed in Syria. The United States suspended embassy operations in February of 2012, and we currently have no official presence on the ground in Damascus. For now, we rely too heavily on formal handshakes, bro hugs, and the backstabbing that happens in the United Nations behind me. No amount of resolutions or signatures is going to remove Assad from power and protect the Syrian people from a brutal regime.
Yesterday morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions, being carried in the arms of desperate parents.
Especially as Russia continues to roadblock our efforts, subvert our capabilities, and enable Assad. But Russia and Putin are a topic for a different day. For now, an aim small for President Trump and his band of Mar-a-Lago caddies. That's it for this week. Like me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @FrancisRichopi, and check out my website, francisrichopi.com. See you next week.